Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is a talk video, and we are back with our latest ship, Dengar's Punishing One, to elevate the Executor fleet, a dark-side scoundrel bounty hunter attacker. We're going to do our typical thing here, looking at the developer insights and tips, then break down and analyze the kit. The Punishing One is going to have a number of mechanics that are tied to out-of-turn attacks. It's going to relate to cooldowns. Then we're also going to be seeing some similarity to Dengar himself, with how he can steal stealth from enemies. He will be inflicting Deathmark, adding that to the fleet, and then they give us a series of tips where they hint at using the right allies, synergizes with bounty hunter debuffs for damage, which suggests breach, target lock, marked, deploy with all bounty hunter allies, gives passive benefits, and that's important because really this entire kit's about the unique. We're even going to start with the unique in a moment, and then highlights a need for reinforcement priorities. So pay attention to that. We'll begin with unique ability because that's what's really important with this kit. Jump Master 5000. At the battle start or when reinforced, the Punishing One gains 3 speed per bounty hunter ally and 6 speed per light side enemy, and that includes the capital ship. Now that's a big boost, but what we need to understand is the base stats on the ship, and with the Punishing One, it's kind of lower half right here at 176 speed, which is okay. But what is going to happen from this speed boost is it's going to get about 32 speed in addition if you are going up against a light side fleet, which will be enough to get it to about 208, which will be in the top 10 fastest ships under the right condition. And I do find this interesting. I think it's something that we should be paying attention to for the future. I think these types of conditions are going to become more common. This is a way for CG to control how a ship or character gets used. That's a little bit different than what we've seen in the past, where we've seen added stats based on the right squad. This is another way for them to do it. It creates these opportunities where CG can control a little bit more for unintended interactions. Next, whenever Punishing One assists a bounty hunter ally, if the enemy has buff immunity or marked, we're going to stun them for 1 turn, and this is unresistible. And there's not a ton of assist calls, but when Razor Crest or the Executor calls an assist, we should choose our targets accordingly. And I think this ties back into the strategy tips where they suggested that the priority of the reinforcements matter, because Cad Bane also has an assist call, and it might suggest that we want the Xanadu blood to come out before the Slave One. And it's definitely something that we should be testing for as we get to explore this fleet in a day. Next, whenever an enemy attacks out of turn, reduce the cooldowns of Wanted Dead by 1, and that's tripled if the enemy is light side. And this is the second special, and we're going to get to it. It is a 9-turn cooldown. So it means if we're going up against the right light side fleet with a lot of assists, then we're going to very quickly make that second special available. So this is very clearly a hard profundity counter. It probably means their profundity now is no longer the clear number 2 best fleet. It might move down to a 3rd, or the 2nd place fleet is going to be a little bit more conditional. Any fleet with assists is going to be hurt by this, but something like the Negotiator, there's probably ways that we could navigate through it, at least on offense, if we're just making a note to not use the assist abilities. Whenever an enemy attacks the Punishing One out of turn, the Punishing One recovers 10% health and protection. That's just going to make it a little bit more tanky, and it means those big abilities where we could try and maybe blow it out with a single attack with all those assist calls, that's not going to be the way that we're going to want to handle this fleet. At the battle start, if the Punishing One is deployed and all allies are bounty hunters, excluding the capital ship, the enemy Imperial TIE Fighter ships lose 200% crit chance and evasion for the encounter, and they said this a little bit higher in the frequently asked questions portion. This includes the TIE Defender, so that means Chimera counters are going to be a whole lot weaker, but I think they still have a chance. It just means we are really relying on the ultimate to equalize things and knock out the Houndstooth, which wasn't always necessary without the Punishing One. The Ally Empire capital ship gains 5 speed. That's for the Executor. That might mess up a lot of counters just because that means getting to the ultimate a little bit faster. Might help things with the Leviathan though. That is going to be interesting. And then Ally Bounty Hunter attackers gain 100% bonus protection. So that's a nice boost to survivability to start out the match with, and that's going to help ensure that Bounty Hunter allies don't get taken out quickly at the start. Like if you're going up against like the triple attacker lineup, you always players want to try and knock out IG-2000 very quickly, those kinds of strategies are not really going to work with the Punishing One on the field. And our final Punishing One at the start of the battle boost is going to be that the Punishing One self-cleanses debuffs and ignores taunt on its first turn. That's going to potentially be pretty huge, because the Punishing One has some nice abilities, a nice big basic attack, and this allows us to target the ship that will potentially be the most vulnerable to those attacks. At the start of the enemy's capital ship's turn, all enemies lose 100% crit damage until the end of the turn. This is going to just mitigate the consequences of any mass assist abilities, because now not only is the Punishing One, if you were to target it, going to recover a little bit, now the damage output is going to be nullified. So using that ability isn't going to make a lot of sense regardless. And now what we're looking at is a situation where maybe the Chimera counter we need to be more careful with, or this just might push the Finalizer into being an important counter for this fleet in particular. Whenever an enemy gains stealth, dispel it, inflict breach on that ship, and the Punishing One is going to stealth. That's somewhat similar to how Dengar himself functions. And then while the Punishing One is active, breached enemies are going to have minus 25% health and protection recovery. That's going to nullify the recovery that the Y-Wing and Falcon present with the Profundity feed. And the last part here, enemies with Deathmark can't recover health and protection, and whenever an enemy with Deathmark is defeated, ally bounty hunters are going to gain 100% defense and recover 100% protection. We'll get into that a little bit more when we hit the special abilities. But before we do the attacks, we're just going to do the reinforcement right now. Skip Tracer, enter the battle, Punishing One gains defense penetration up for 2 turns, inflict target enemy with buff immunity, and I highly doubt that we need to ever be aware of this again, because this fleet is clearly designed with the Punishing One being a starting vessel. Both the strength of the unique ability makes that true, but also the weakness of this reinforcement ability. It's not completely useless. Buff immunity has some nice uses, like with countering the Hound's Tooth, for instance, but in general, this is not a big deal. Now for our attack abilities, the basic quad laser cannon. Physical damage to the target. Deal an additional instance of damage for each of the following: breach, marked, and target locked. All this is nice. I think it's going to make this fleet dangerous. I'm expecting this to be a very strong attack, and it's going to get stronger once the payout for the Executor happens, when multiples of these debuffs are going to be present and also locked in place. The first special, Disruptive Combo. This is a cooldown of 3. This is AoE physical damage and AoE buff dispel. Target other bounty hunter ally gains potency up and is called to assist. So this is going to be nice. Pairs well with the unique, because with the unique, on the first turn, the Punishing One can ignore taunt. So we can go after whatever ship that we want and ensure that the debuffs of marked and breach land, so that we can call in the Razor Crest and make sure that we are going after a fleet's most vulnerable target. That's going to open up some counters, potentially be very powerful, especially up against the light side enemies, where we can just ignore the Y-Wing, end up going after the Outrider, marking it right from the start. And then that speed loss is going to help ensure that those fleets can't recover in enough time to cause any problems for what we want to do with the Executor fleet. The second special, Wanted Dead, a cooldown of 9. Think of this ability like a soft ultimate, and we highlighted it in the unique portion of this video where we described how all of those out of turn attacks are going to reduce the cooldowns from this ability, and it's tripled on the light side enemies. So we're going to see a situation where mass attacks are going to allow us to use this second special potentially in maybe a turn or 2. We will absolutely not want to use the Profundity on offense up against this thing. Now, physical damage to the target enemy and inflict the target with Deathmark for 2 turns. And remember from the unique that Deathmark is going to stop health and protection recovery, and if we take out an enemy with Deathmark, the bounty hunter allies are going to stack defense. We will also AoE inflict breach. Now later in the battle, this isn't a big deal, so it doesn't really matter as much if we only get to use use this after the 9-turn cooldown up against a fleet that doesn't have a lot of assists, because by that point we might be in a situation where the Executor's payout has already been triggered and they already have a locked breach debuff. What this is really for is the opportunity early in a battle, if this condition is triggered, that puts breach out everywhere very early, which allows us to mark those ships and start knocking them down quickly. This is to pair with the Razor Crest and to make a lot of damage. And finally, the Punishing One recovers 100% health and the ability starts on cooldown. So that's a pretty small kit, but it packs a huge punch, particularly with that unique ability, which is really going to help shake things up with the fleet metas. It's going to be pretty interesting. Hopefully somebody can find a way to make this a more consistent and less expensive counter with the Executor up against the Leviathan, because some of the current ones, I know it works, but it requires putting those pilots a little bit stronger than I would like to have them. Maybe this is a situation where we don't moving forward. Also, you know, too bad I can't rush this thing to 7 stars, but if this makes the game more profitable for CG and keeps this game going on for a long time, then great, because I want this game to go on for many more years. I still enjoy playing it and I still enjoy making these videos. So thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everybody. This still plays Galaxy of Heroes.